Hello, and welcome to the first ever live stream on Davis weather tracking. Today, we are going to be discussing the potential for severe weather over the next couple of days, more in depth than in our usual forecasts. Yesterday, I couldn't get one out exactly because I had schoolwork to do, but today I've made up for that by doing a live stream. So, you know what? Let's get into it. Let's just go over everything before we start to take questions, but here is today's weather outlook. Hello, SIV Team WX. Welcome. Let's look at today's outlook real quickly. We have a marginal risk. As you can see, this is the new SPC risk. These are the new kind of style of them. It's very modern. I like it. It's very cool. We have a less than 2% tornado and wind, and we have a hail with a SIG 1 intensity level for portions of northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas. Those areas are in a SIG 1. Now, that doesn't just mean we're getting significant hail. That means we could see potentially hail 1 to 1.5 inches in diameter, maybe there. Moreover, severe intensity. I have my cat here with me. Holy crap. So that area could be experiencing that kind of weather today. Not much threat today. Hello, Squashy Candle 13. That's an interesting name. Gotta love them. So overall, today's risk is not that great. It's when we start getting through tomorrow that we start wanting to look at it. Tomorrow is like our first big threat for the outbreak, potentially. We have a 2% tornado risk outlined from central Texas all the way up to Indiana, a 15% wind with no SIG threat, and a 15% hail also with no SIG threat. So tomorrow's risk doesn't look too extreme. It kind of varies and relies on if we actually get initiation of thunderstorms down here. Not exactly sure if we will. So we will see how that goes. Yeah, so not much severe weather is expected tomorrow, but we'll still be watching it closely. Depends on if we get initiation. We'll take a look at models here in a sec. Day 3 is when we start to really want to look out. We have a SIG 1 threat all the way from central Texas near portions of Lubbock, all the way up through portions of Nebraska, near Lincoln, Nebraska. They could be seeing some threats. Most areas here in a slight risk, you could see. That is expected to potentially bring the threat of, we'll be talking about that in a sec, but maybe this could be a higher bit for hail and tornadoes, especially if we get some discrete development. We'll, as I said before, we'll take a look at that in models, and our potentially our biggest day actually want to pay attention to is Friday. This is our day 4 outlook. We have a 30%. This is still in the old outlook system. We'll get an update on that tomorrow, but we have a 30% risk that's equivalent to an enhanced risk from southern Oklahoma, even portions of northern Texas there, all the way up to very southern tip of Iowa, possibly. Cities include that in the SPC mentioned: Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Tulsa, Overland Park, Kansas City. Those areas in that 30%, and we have a 15% extending all the way from Chicago, about getting up there close to Milwaukee, actually includes it, through Omaha, all the way down through Dallas, and getting close to maybe Austin there. So those areas are going to be in that 15%. That's going to look like our biggest day of the event, possibly. So we'll be looking at threats, though it's still a little bit too far out to decipher. And day 5, we did originally have a 15% risk down here for portions of northern Texas. However, that risk has been removed as predictability has become a little bit too low. We might see it come back. We will see about that. Day 6, 7, and 8, also predictability too low. If we look at our discussion, though, on Sunday in the mid-levels, a 90 to 110 knot jet is forecast, and moisture advection is going to take place from the Central Plains into the Great Lakes, and that should favorable for isolated severe thunderstorms Monday afternoon. Tuesday, a strong upper level system is expected to eject northeastward into the south central U.S. There is a greater severe weather threat appears possible Tuesday afternoon over the central and southern plains. However, uncertainty is considerable. So yeah, we could see a potential outlook be added for Tuesday next week. That's going to be on our day 8. We might see that maybe tomorrow or maybe the next day after that. Depends how confident and how these models shift up. But that is generally what we have for our risk today. So now that we've done that, we can start going into our models. So let's get right into that. Actually, hold on. We do have a question here from Civ Team WX. What SIG do you think we'll have on Friday? It all kind of depends. Hello, Kitty. It all kind of depends on what kind of threats we're going to have. We won't exactly know for sure until we get to about tomorrow. Tomorrow, I imagine we'll probably have a SIG 1 outlined for all of this area. Whether we have a SIG 2, it would probably be outlined from Kansas to Oklahoma. Those areas, I think that's where our biggest threat's going to be, kind of setting up along this frontal boundary that is likely to set up there. I think that's where we're going to see our biggest SIG risk on Friday. Just the SIG risk kind of depends on the threats. So we'll be able to decipher that more as we get into like the day 2 and day 1 period. But let's have a look at some models now. Which model do we want to take a look at first? Let's take a look at tomorrow first. So let's take a look at the HRRR model here to decipher what exactly we're going to have for tomorrow. Let's go to our southern Great Plains here. Looks like it's a breaking alarm. All right, let's take a look at our storm time frame here. So let's stretch this through. Here's tomorrow at about 1 o'clock. This is 18Z, Wednesday, March 4th. This is 12 p.m. Central. And we're going to extend this a little forward here. And you can see we have thunderstorm initiation, kind of general thunderstorms throughout the day across the northern portion of the slight risk. Whether this is actually going to inhibit our real threat is in question still. But it's expected that this round of thunderstorms may be kind of our risk up there into portions of Illinois and Indiana. But our southern risk is going to start to initiate as we get towards nighttime, evening, throughout portions of the nighttime hours. From 8 to 10 p.m. is, well, from 7 to 9, because it's central, from 7 to 9 p.m. central, we're going to start to see those thunderstorms fire off. And those will likely become severe decently quickly. We'll take a look at the NAM in a sec, because that has a completely different scenario. But thunderstorms will kind of be stretching on a line from southwest of Dallas all the way up through maybe St. Louis, getting close up there. We see there we have a potentially strong thunderstorm. This is just being modeled on the HRRR. Not exactly sure about that, but we'll see how that ends up faring over the next couple of days or so. So if we have a look continuing this through the nighttime hours, those thunderstorms diminish actually rather quickly and kind of spread apart to the north as they lose that daytime heating and instability that they once had, become generally non-severe as we get towards the nighttime and early morning hours. And that threat should be completely gone by the time we get into the morning. Maybe some leftover convection across portions of northern Kentucky and southern Indiana and Illinois. But let's take a look at the NAMST model. This is the NAM 3K, as some of you know it, or the NAMST. This is the convection allowing model from the NAM that it brings to us. And my cat is meowing. Wow. Yes, Alexis. All right. All right, Kitty. So from this is kind of today's threat. This is going to be mainly an overnight threat, as you can see. Mostly in northern Oklahoma. It's going to be centered not much in Kansas there. I wouldn't be too worried. But let's get into tomorrow's threat. This kind of leftover convection, actually, I didn't mention this, is going to be kind of responsible for that threat. It's going to kind of re-intensify throughout the day across portions of northern Arkansas into Missouri, portions of southern Indiana and Illinois. But we'll notice something. This model does not fire the southern convection whatsoever. Now, the reason that is due to something we call the cap. The cap is basically a warmer layer of air above the cooler layer of air in the kind of along the surface. We look at our surface temperatures. Our surface temperatures tomorrow are going to be getting up to about the high 70s to low to mid, maybe high 70s across some of these areas. Further south you go, you might be getting to the 80s. A nice taste of summer for those areas. But generally low to mid 70s across our severe weather risk. Wow, that thing's breaking. And our dew points are going to be getting up into about the mid 60s or so. That's pretty conducive. That's generally favorable for severe weather. When will South Dakota start getting severe weather? South Dakota, you guys might start to get severe weather as we head into maybe even late March, early April. But mainly your severe weather threat is going to be focused in the summertime and maybe late spring if you guys get some trough ejection somehow managed to get all the way up there. But South Dakota should start getting severe weather in maybe late spring, early summer, and peak season is going to be in like June, July, that kind of area for you guys. But as of now, most of our severe weather is going to be focused in the southern plains. That's where we're going to see most of our severe weather, maybe stretching up close to portions of the Midwest as well. But we take a look here. Let's look at our convective available potential energy in the mean layer. And this also has convective inhibition labeled on top of it. And as you can see, we have a lot of that. What convective inhibition is, it's kind of what inhibits convection from occurring. Now, we have a lot of this. This doesn't exactly mean that we are guaranteed no thunderstorms across these areas, but it does mean we have a stronger cap than is usual. You see that cap kind of do have a little bit of spots where it gets above 0 in these areas, and those areas are where we're expected to see higher convection amounts, more thunderstorm activity. But it gets a little weird in the south because you do have some of it, but that tapers off as we head into the evening. There is some spots that it will allow for convection to fire. And if we look at our storm relative helicity here, this is kind of helps us decipher where maybe our highest amount of wind shear, highest tornadic threat could be. But generally, anything above 100, maybe 200 is what we start to see favorable for tornadoes. Now, even SRH of 150 can produce tornadoes, but it's more conducive across portions of northern Arkansas and southern Missouri. Now, I don't think tornadoes are going to be our main threat. I think it's actually going to be large hail. That, I believe, is going to be our biggest concern for the Wednesday timeframe tomorrow. Maybe some damaging winds sprinkled in there, but not a lot of exactly tornadic development I'm expecting. We could see a couple isolated tornadoes, but luckily nothing strong. I'm going to refresh this because this is breaking a little bit. But that's generally what I think about that. Now, let's go to the NAM model, and let's start to discuss Thursday. That threat is where we could see more discrete. But there's something interesting I want to note about the NAM. The NAM doesn't fire anything for Thursday. It has that cap really strong on Thursday for some reason. And we don't even see temperatures getting into the 60s at all in those areas under the severe weather. Southern areas may see portions of them getting into the 60s and low 70s. But you see here, we have 55, 56 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. That is not exactly favorable for now. It also has our dew points not getting that high exactly over these areas. Now, whether the reason that is because of that cold front, that stalled frontal boundary, don't know. We'll be taking a look at that in depth potentially. We could see that become an inhibiting factor if these dew points can't recover quickly enough. However, if they do, we will have generally conducive environmental conditions. We have Cape over 1,000 across most of that area. That is expected to see severe weather. And by the way, let me outline that real quick. Our main severe weather area is going to be across portions of northern Texas, getting into the Oklahoma Panhandle here. That's pretty small. Let's change that. Wow. This area is where kind of the most severe weather is expected to be in that main area of convective available potential energy. But as we head into, that doesn't really, that cap does not break at all. We have a lot of convective inhibition here. So whether or not convective fires depends on a lot of different factors here. If that cap can break before the sun sets, we will see. But that is just the NAM model. Other models are not exactly modeling that. We'll take a look at pivotal weather. That has a few more convection allowing models like the RRFS. And that, though, that tends to be a little overproducing supercells, as some of you may know. But let's continue to have a look at this. Let's look at the RAP model next. We'll discuss tomorrow with the RAP model. This is kind of a little bit like the HRR, but it's also like a little bit different. So let's have a look here at our simulated reflectivity. Now, the RAP does tend to over-convect a little bit sometimes on the precipitation, but you can see here it does fire our thunderstorms pretty early, actually, on Wednesday. It fires them around 2 p.m., which I don't know if that's going to happen, but our main supercell threat for maybe, supercells or so, maybe a little bit of a line here forming across as we get into the nighttime hours. But that cap definitely breaks on this model, and pretty early too. So that could be overconvection, but generally I'd say between 3 and 8 p.m. is when we expect thunderstorms to start firing across our main risk area. Now let's start taking a look at Friday, as this is going to be potentially our biggest day. Let's go to the Euro model, or the ECMWF. Let's look at Friday here. Now, we saw on Thursday that moisture was starting to get advected to the north here, as a huge surge of moisture is going to continue north, as a low pressure up here in portions of the central Great Plains is going to form. Now, we don't exactly have a great sector to work with here, so we'll be taking a look at a couple here. But let's have a look at what is going to happen on Friday. There's that cold front. That's going to be our trigger here. That cold front sweeping through the area on Friday. Let me actually choose a different sector. Maybe the Midwest will work. That cold front is going to be our culprit here, sweeping right through the area here on Friday. Boom, goes right through that area. That's where severe weather is going to be, along that cold front. And the areas that experience kind of the strongest amount of daytime heating will get the worst of it. So that generally, that 30% outline is where we expect it. Let's take a look at our most unstable cape/shear. Now, this isn't exactly the best instability, but is the only one that the ECMWF offers. So most of that highest instability is going to be anywhere from Des Moines, Iowa, all the way down through Oklahoma City and areas south of that. What are the chances of the enhanced risk on Friday getting upgraded to moderate? I would not see that out of question. If things all happen to line up correctly, we could see a moderate risk. It just all depends on how the models and everything kind of line up. As of now, I'm not seeing anything that would warrant a moderate risk on like day 3 or day 2, but things will change, and we will see if anything changes and whether or not it needs a moderate risk upgrade. To be honest, I didn't see a lot of confidence to include that enhanced, but we'll see. So let's look at Friday's threat here. You can see there's our line. We don't know the exact mode of this. It might be more linear in the northern portions of this enhanced and more cellular in the southern portions. We don't exactly know yet, but this Euro model kind of has that main line of thunderstorms firing around, I'd say, 6 to 8 p.m., 5 to 8, we'll say, to give a general idea, though it is still a little far out to know specifics for sure. That line will kind of move through the area, as well as some potentially supercells across portions of Oklahoma into Arkansas. That line will kind of continue and die off as it gets towards the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. You never know. On Saturday, there is a small chance that it may re-intensify across portions of the lower Ohio Valley, but that is awaited to be seen. So Friday's threat, let's look at our 850 millibar. This is how we take a look kind of at our lower level jet to take a look for tornado potential. That lower level jet on Friday looks decent across portions of Missouri. That, I think, is where we're expected to see our highest potential tornado threat, but we'll have to see how that ends up faring. Let's look at our trough here at the 500 millibar level. That main trough is going to be the main jet streak here, it looks like, is going to be centered across portions of Iowa and Nebraska as it kind of shifts throughout the day on Friday nighttime into Saturday morning as well. That area, I think, is when we expect to see maybe the highest severe weather potential. Could be stretching from Kansas all the way up through Iowa. That Oklahoma area, we don't see as much. We see a couple ripples here that may indicate maybe a shortwave trough in there, but not all of that insane forcing that we see at the tip of this trough here is present. But let's go down here to Oklahoma and take a look at what they could be experiencing. Let's look at our Friday to see where exactly in Oklahoma you guys could be seeing, as you guys are outlined in that risk. So Friday, there is that extended portion down here of the lower level jet. This area could see maybe the highest amount of vorticity. They have the best environmental conditions. They have the highest dew points, the highest temperatures, and the most cape. So they have the highest conducive conditions. Just can they get that trigger that will spark those thunderstorms? Cape up to possibly all the way stretching over 2,000 across portions of Texas, though the forcing is much weaker there. But we do see a line, potentially some supercells here, firing from central Texas all the way through Oklahoma, rather than that linear line it looks like across portions of Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa. Extreme Weather says hi. Hello, Extreme Weather. We are covering currently Friday's threat. We've covered the previous threats in a little bit earlier in the stream. You can take a look at that if you want. But yeah, Friday is generally looking like potentially our biggest day for maybe tornadoes, as the more discrete mode in the south and more linear mode in the north. Though, like we said before, specifics are too exactly, we can't get into them until we get about 2 or 1 day out even. Here's Saturday's threat. Saturday, we're expecting that across portions of Texas, that 15% that was outlined yesterday but has been removed today due to lower confidence in exactly enough. Like, we don't exactly know. I don't see. This looks like potentially a line of severe thunderstorms that maybe will produce some damaging winds. We do have enough CAPE. It just depends if it will get enough of that forcing, as mainly that main trough is going to be out here. We aren't going to see a lot of that forcing for ascent that we usually do in these kind of setups. So that may be unfavorable for our conditions on Saturday. But let's briefly take a look here at the future. As you saw before, the SPC we discussed earlier in the stream, they did mark Tuesday as potential. They haven't marked it on their map just yet, but they have mentioned Tuesday as a potential risk day. And let's have a look at that. Tuesday is available on our 12Z ECMWF run. And you can see that trough will be kind of displaced. This is our trough that's going to be displaced on Friday here. It's going to be displaced across portions until it finally ejects, kind of converges. This subtropical one will kind of converge here with the polar jet stream. These two jet streams will converge on Tuesday, and that could create another potential widespread threat. Now, specifics are still pretty far out, but we do have a pretty extended lower level jet here, all the way stretching from portions of Oklahoma up through Chicago. So those areas, wow, especially as we get into later on through the nighttime. Let's look at our dew points here on Friday. This could be a more extended threat on Friday. We have dew points in the 60s all the way from Michigan down to Texas. So this could be a more expansive threat on Friday, maybe extending from portions of the Great Lakes and the Midwest, Ohio Valley, all the way down to the southeast. Now, specifics are still a little far out. Not a lot of instability up there either. So it would be probably more southerly that we see that accumulated precipitation amounts. Yeah, wow, we do have a pretty decent and a second line stretching from portions of the lower Ohio Valley down through Texas. So maybe 2 modes with this setup. We don't exactly know yet. It's way too far out. And even on Wednesday, there a second threat develops across portions of Dixie Alley, even there, heading up into the Great Lakes once again. So that's kind of what we're seeing overall from today's threat and all the way through the next week time frame. 2 more things I want to look at before we'll start taking a lot of questions here. One of those being the CSU-MLP. That is kind of like, it's the Colorado State University's little severe weather, kind of reminiscent of the SPC's probabilities, but not quite exactly like them. For today, that hail threat is obviously the highest, and it's mainly across portions of central Oklahoma. Those stretches up there into Kansas and even into northern Texas as well. A little bit of a damaging wind threat, and even a small tornado threat, but I don't think any of those are going to be our biggest threats. Here's tomorrow. You see, not a lot of tornadic threat, mainly only a 0.041. And it doesn't even have a slight risk on this model. Now, once again, this isn't exactly reminiscent, but our main risk looks like it's going to be centered anywhere from Missouri down to Texas. It just all depends if we can get that cap to break and enough convection to fire. Now, on Thursday, things get a little more interesting here. Here's our overall severe probability. We do have that SIG-1 threat here, as we mentioned earlier, from Texas all the way up through Kansas. So that area is where we're expecting the highest threat. Quick question here from Electric Tornado Storms WX. What do you think about central Ohio? Do you think any risks will expand up to there? Now, central Ohio, I'm not exactly sure, but as we head into the later threat, if we do look at our expanded threat, we do see that Central Ohio is mentioned across portions of some of these, especially Tuesday there. That will be something we look into in the future as this trough continues to eject to the east as we get later on in the week and into the weekend and even early next week. That's when I would expect to start worrying about Central Ohio. Thank you for the question, though. And now that we're here, we can have a look at, on Friday, a very expansive threat. They have a 15% all the way from Michigan down to northern Texas. I don't think it's going to get that far north. It kind of depends. But once again, do notice they don't have that SIG or enhanced risk. Like I mentioned, yeah, no problem. Electric storms. So Saturday, like I said, that potential re-intensification of that line of storms could be occurring across portions of the Great Lakes region, and that threat could stretch all the way down through Texas. On Sunday, I don't think we're going to see that big of a threat as kind of that moisture is still being displaced mainly to our south, and we don't get a large amount of forcing from any trough. But as we get towards Monday and Tuesday, we start to see that moisture get returned back up to the north as another low pressure and another trough. Like we mentioned before, that subtropical and tropical jet stream kind of converge on Tuesday. So we'll see that threat shift to the east. So that's kind of what we're expecting over the next few days. There's one more thing we can look at here, and it's the NSSL severe weather probabilities. We saw this a couple days ago. I mentioned it on one of my forecasts. So, yes, I believe severe weather probabilities. Excuse this, folks, as I'm trying to figure out where this went. For now, before we do that, let's have a look at the... Where is it? CSU Accumulated SCP. Here it is. Okay. I found it, folks. This is what I wanted to have a look at. Here is our extended range severe weather probabilities. As you can see here, mainly, this is the daily sum. This isn't exactly like... But the higher colors, the more contrasted colors you see, daily sum goes all the way up to 3,000. That doesn't mean we're going to see 3,000 SPC in an area or SCP. That just means we're going to see accumulate over the entire CONUS. But generally, warmer colors mean more severe weather. And as we can see here, Tuesday seems to be the generally highest day of that. And if we look at our daily sum on here, most of that, and this is compared to normal. So -1 mean it's below normal for this time of year, and anything above 0 mean it's above normal. And we see especially there as we get towards Monday and Tuesday. I'm not sure about Monday, but Tuesday looks like it's going to be our highest threat. And you can even see there on Friday a little bit of a peak there. And even as we get towards the later part, might be watching that, but that's way too far out to know for sure. I just realized I wasn't sharing that, but here it is. Wow, that is funny. Those areas we could be seeing maybe Tuesday next week as a potential watch day as well. Overall, though, I don't think we can know for sure until we get to about maybe Sunday or Monday what Tuesday is going to look like. But we'll have to watch that rather closely. The Euro model is kind of nearly done here, so let's take a look at that. Wednesday, not much. Like we said, we won't know for sure. Thursday, it's likely going to maybe be across the East Coast. We won't know. And Friday, hopefully that system will be out of here and we can be done with this severe weather threat. So if you guys have any questions for me, anything you guys want to know, ask away, and I'll be answering some of those as it's getting closer to the 4:45 EST time. So anything you want to know about the severe weather potential in your area or just any threats overall for the severe weather. So let's see here. Actually, can we take a look at this GFS model? So actually, so let's have a look at this briefly. before I take your questions. The GFS model here for Wednesday, it does fire that convection across portions of Texas. Unlike the NAM has been an outlier in that kind of sense. It has not been firing our convection. And as we get towards Friday and Thursday it definitely fires that convection all the way from Kansas down through Texas. And on Friday here, it doesn't actually really fire that northern mode as much. It's more focused on that southern mode where we could see that potential. I think the southern mode is going to be a little bit more favorable for the severe weather than the northern portion of the risk, but it is outlined, so we do have to watch it closely. Saturday morning, that risk is mainly going to shift, and this one doesn't exactly. It has some re-intensification of the line in the north, but it more has it focuses south as that high pressure begins to sit in and kind of inhibits any potential convection that could fire. And as you see on Monday, this doesn't really have a risk. It has a little bit for portions of the southeast, but on Tuesday, that's really when we see that risk. This one has it a little bit of a different setup. That main low pressure is really nowhere to be found. It's kind of a banana low right here, but we do have an area of thunderstorm stretching from portion of the Great Lakes down through Texas. So those areas could be where we want to watch. At least we're seeing it slightly consistently in a way. And as we get further out, this is when we really don't know for sure. I don't know what that is, but we don't really know for sure once we get this far out. Overall, I think our main highest threat are going to be on Friday, maybe Thursday if we can get that cap to break, and on Tuesday next week, but that's still a little far away to know for sure. Here's an ensemble model. Here's the mean temperature, 850 millibar temperature. This is kind of where we can see our ridges building in our troughs. We'll actually take a look at the 500 millibar jet here. That you see high temperatures, warm across that area. And as we get later on, this is where we become unsure. But let's have a look at our mean wind here. This is more how we were able to tell where this trough is going to set out. See this little tiny kink here? This little trough is going to be the complete reason that all this is happening. That trough is going to eject off to the northeast, and an entirely new trough is going to be the reason for our severe weather on Friday. This one over here is going to be more of our troublemaker on Friday. But as you can see, it's kind of in that in-between zone where we're expecting our severe weather here. So if that trough can enable enough forcing, then we could definitely see that cap break a lot easier. However, if we don't see that cap break on Friday, then we could honestly, I would not be surprised if we get nothing. And here's, sorry, not Friday, Thursday. On Friday's set, this is the 30%. You see that trough, especially that jet streak here, building across the area. And that's where it's going to be at its strongest as it continues to push over the Great Lakes and into Canada. By then, it's going to be out of the country, and we won't have to worry about it anymore. But pay attention to this little guy here. That kind of got displaced as that trough ejected to the northeast. Look at that trough. Look what it does. This trough begins to kind of combine with this tropical or with the polar jet stream, and it could allow for a second trough to build, and that could be what we watch out for on Tuesday. This trough down here, that little second one that kind of builds back south throughout the day. So overall, and then there's even another one here that appears later on the model. Overall, Friday, watch that day very carefully, and as well as portions of maybe as we end to early next week too. Those timeframes, I think, is when we're going to see our highest amount of severe weather potential. Actually, I do have a question for you guys that are now just joining, or if you are on already. What do you think of the new SPC Outlook? Here's what it looks like. Now, what do you guys think? How do you think the new? Like it? Do you hate it? Do you not really care? Me personally, I mentioned this at the start of the stream. I rather like this change. I think it's very good, especially for like my own, because this severe weather threats, they mentioned this a couple times. They aren't exactly made for like the general public. They are made for more severe weather enthusiasts to pass on the information. They've mentioned this a couple times. I don't know if you saw their video, but this kind of, I like that it adds a little bit of intricacy. It adds more what's the word? It adds more detail onto where you could see the highest amount of severe weather. Civ Team WX, it's good. Yeah, I agree. I like it. And just overall, the appearance of it is more modernistic a little bit. You can see a lot more. It's more styled, and it's not as much cluttered as the other one was. So I think it's a good change. I think this was definitely needed. It was a while in the making. Overall, and I think Friday especially is when we're going to see the big test for our SIG threats, as well as Thursday. As we mentioned before, we do have a SIG 1 here from Texas all the way up to Nebraska. Potential of a SIG 2 being added in here for what? I don't know yet. Maybe for large hail. I think maybe hail is going to be the biggest threat. Once again, if these storms are likely to be discrete, hail could be our biggest threat, as well as maybe a couple isolated events of damaging winds and maybe some tornadoes. Tomorrow, we're going to be able to see what the day 4 through 8 outlook looks like. If they decide to include Saturday again, they add it back, but we'll see about that. They might also add Tuesday, or that'll be day 7. That would be rather bold of them if they end up adding Tuesday and a 15% risk. We will see about that. Overall, I think... I'm just trying to think here. This could be potentially the biggest severe weather threat. One earlier across portions of Dixie Alley, and we saw one up there in the lower Ohio Valley across portions of Illinois. This one is going to be definitely our most significant of the year. It's got a lot of risks here, and even though we don't have risks here for Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, they all could see severe weather, except for maybe Sunday. So that's what I think is going to overall be of this severe weather outbreak, folks. Thank you all for tuning in to today's forecast stream. If you're just joining here at the end and you missed the main portion of it, you can watch it back here on YouTube, and it'll be covering all of the basics for what we've been expecting across severe weather throughout the next week. So thank you all for tuning in. Any final questions before we leave? And if you don't, then we will be hopping off here. So, folks, thank you for watching. This will be the first stream. I'll probably have another briefing tomorrow, and we'll likely be going live on maybe, I got to think, because I'm going to be working actually on Friday and Saturday, but Thursday maybe we'll go live, maybe Saturday if things end up shaping up that way. Unfortunately, Friday I won't be able to, especially because I have to work, but I will see you again maybe later today if I post a little short, and tomorrow for another briefing and maybe a live stream. So thank you all for watching. I am Justin Davis. Welcome to Davis Weather Tracking. Well, I guess not welcome. Goodbye. And I will see you all in the next one. Thank you for watching.